Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Friday to you. We're staring down a 3-day weekend for most of you, Labor Day, as we start to roll into the month of September. September, of course, is always one of those busier months when it comes to hurricane season. We always say that about August as well, but August ended up being a little bit on the light side when it comes to tropical activity. We had Ernesto a while back, but for the most part, things have been relatively quiet, but it does look like things are going to start to increase in activity here over the Atlantic Basin as the models are starting to really show some activity, and also the satellites are showing some pretty decent tropical waves moving their way across the Atlantic Ocean. Let's start out though with our temperatures here in Lafayette. I can't remember the last time I had a temperature at noon that was under 80 degrees, and it is not raining at my house right now, but we've got a lot of cloud cover. Dew point at 74, humidity 87%, winds out of the east-southeast at 6, pressure is 30.05. My wife has a 4-day weekend this time around, and with the cloudy skies and the temperatures under 80, there's gumbo being made in my house already for this weekend. And I did notice on Facebook that there's a lot of folks that were thinking about, okay, well, we're getting into September. It's not 100 degrees. I'm going to make myself a gumbo. So maybe there might be a few of you having gumbo for your Labor Day weekend rather than barbecue or smoked meat or grilled stuff out there. So whatever you eat over the weekend, I hope it's good. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you don't eat too much of it. Check it out. We've got a lot of cloud cover that's out there today here on our traffic cams. It does appear that some of the roadways are generally dry. They were a bit more wet this morning with the active rain out there, but right now we're catching a little bit of a break here in the mid part of Acadiana, but we've got another round of rain that is starting to make its way onshore here, and you can see here into Cameron Parish and into Calcasieu Parish, you've got some decent rains that are out there, and some more rains are going to start to pull in the coastal sections of Iberia, Vermilion, and St. Mary here very soon, and I think even the areas off to the east. We're not getting as much sunshine out there, so that might be why we're seeing a little bit more stability out there, not quite the coverage like the thunderstorms that we saw yesterday, because at about this time our temperatures were pushing into the mid to upper 80s, and the air mass was relatively unstable, so we had some showers and thunderstorms kind of develop here and move off toward the west. But this time around it looks like more of the action is going to be in the offshore waters and then gradually pull its way inland later today. But there is a bit of a threat. There's an excessive rainfall risk, a slight risk there for some flooding there in Cameron, Vermilion, Calcasieu, as well as southern parts of Jeff Davis Parish, and that expands a little bit more. At least the slight risk, or the marginal risk, tomorrow slides a little bit farther inland, while areas along the coast that are under a slight risk today will also be a slight risk for excessive rainfall going into tomorrow. So looking at the big picture, there's a lot of moisture that's out over the Gulf of Mexico. Got an old trough that's still lingering there along the Texas coast, and then a deeper trough that stretches from north of the Great Lakes back into the Texas Panhandle is going to help to bring some of that extra moisture inland. And there's another look at the satellite imagery. You can see there really is a ton of moisture that's out over the Gulf of Mexico. A bit of a trough kind of there over the Texas coast. And it does appear that we're going to be seeing that trough kind of staying in place here over the next couple of days. So we'll watch that though as it kind of moves off toward the north and eventually kind of fills in. But this trough is really going to be kind of the focal point to really bring in some of that moisture over the Gulf of Mexico and inland to the Acadiana region over the next couple of days. So definitely we're going to be seeing the better chances for those showers and thunderstorms coming on in, and it does appear we're going to be seeing some moderate to heavy rain out there as well. Wave heights out in the Gulf of Mexico aren't so bad, but because of the extra thunderstorms out there, we're seeing more 2 to 4 foot seas, maybe some 5 foot seas around some of the bigger thunderstorms. but not a great boating or fishing day in the offshore waters this time around. So let's go ahead and take a tour of the tropics and Central America. Relatively quiet right now. A tropical wave is approaching from the east. That tropical wave currently over the central part of the Caribbean, right about in here, but there's not a lot of convection associated with it. It's going to go ahead and continue to move off toward the west here over the next couple of days. And then looking out in the middle part of the Caribbean, we're okay, but you can see more of those thunderstorms developing out in the Atlantic east of the Leeward and Windward Islands. And this has been the area of concern over the past couple of days. National Hurricane Center putting a bit of an area here that will probably develop into a tropical depression several days down the road, and pretty much all the models are throwing this into the Caribbean Sea. When it gets into the Caribbean, that of course brings a lot more concern for us here along the Gulf Coast several days down the road. And you've got another tropical wave that's way out here in the Atlantic. That one also seems to be forecast to develop, but I think that one might round more of a ridge of high pressure that's here and might get caught up and pulled out into the middle part of the Atlantic. So not as concerned about the far eastern Atlantic tropical wave as I am with this other tropical wave that's out here over the middle part of the Atlantic that will start to make its way over toward the Windward Islands here a couple of days down the road. I don't think we're going to see any development here today, tomorrow, or maybe into Sunday. I think it's going to be more likely into next week. And the National Hurricane Center also pointing at where that tropical wave is right now, and then the arrow pointing into the orange circle is where they think there's a better chance for some development. So we're talking about maybe 2, 3, 4 days down the road, but most of the models are indicating something developing in the Caribbean Sea sometime next week. So that's something that we will be watching. So let's go ahead and go through some of the model suites. And there is some agreement and some disagreement in the models here. This is going out 10 days. Remember, the GFS model goes out 16, and there's probably a few of you who have already seen some of the final solutions of the last couple of model runs. The one that ran earlier this morning was pegging South Louisiana as a landfall, as a major hurricane, and this latest one here is turning this more over the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps making a landfall somewhere along the Florida coast by about day 12. So that's going to be about Wednesday of the following week. So this is going to be a slow-moving system, not quite moving like what we saw with Ernesto that was really hauling across the Atlantic Ocean before it reached the northern Leeward Islands and going into the northern part of the Caribbean. The Euro model also has this tropical system developing, although very, very slowly there over the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea, and then continuing to make its way off toward the west and possibly being a tropical system here near the Yucatan Peninsula going out for about day 10. So remember, the GFS had something over here at day 10, while the Euro model has something closer to the Yucatan Peninsula at day 10. So some agreement there. I've got two models that are indicating something that's going to be either in the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico or the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So let's move along with the Canadian model. And the reason why I show you all of these different models is because I want to see if there's some kind of an agreement. And you can see a low pressure area really kind of screaming across the Caribbean. The Canadian model yesterday was showing almost nothing, and even earlier this morning wasn't really showing a whole ton of stuff. But the Canadian model now is showing more of a bona fide tropical system reaching the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps there in the Bay of Campeche about 10 days from now, but it moves a lot faster. So if you remember, the GFS was up here while the Euro was right here, and now you've got a Canadian model right there. So again, big time differences in final locations going out 10 days, but also some big time differences in the speed, because the speed, the forward speed of the Canadian model is considerably faster than what we're looking with the Euro as well as the GFS. But the consideration of all three of those having something developing in the Caribbean and then making its way perhaps into the Gulf of Mexico is concerning, but that's something we need to watch over the next several days. There's no big concern right now. But September is always a busy month, and that's why we say make sure you're prepared well ahead of time. Icon model, fresh off the presses early this morning, has a couple of different solutions. This one's kind of interesting. So there is your tropical wave making its way into the Caribbean. And remember, the Icon model only goes out 7 days, but it is indicating a tropical system there. Kind of similar to what we were seeing with the GFS, maybe making more of a possible turn toward Cuba in the final rounds there of the model run. But again, this is going out 7 days. So there's what we're looking at here. And then by the time this model run finishes, the low is about right there going into Monday of next week. But one of the things I want you to notice in here is in the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. There's some lowering of pressures here, and the Icon model has been doing this, and that is with the current batch of tropical moisture that's over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. So Icon model is still suggesting maybe we could get a tropical depression to form out of that big moisture plume in that upper trough that's over Texas. Will that happen? Can't really tell you right now, but the Icon model is really the only one that's kind of focusing on that. But sometimes pressures can start to lower at the surface, and occasionally you can get tropical depressions forming out of that. So can't completely rule out the Icon. At the very least, I can say that there's going to be a lot of moisture there in the western Gulf that's going to be streaming inland across parts of Acadiana. But if it festers out there beyond the holiday weekend, certainly there's a possibility you could see some slow development there. But we're more concerned with that initial wave. And again, there's day 10 for the GFS model. And again, that was pushing, this is the earlier model that we were seeing this morning, had it pushing closer to Louisiana by day 10 or by day 12, which would be September 11th. And I will say the GFS model this time around, the newest model, is basically taking this tropical system more toward a Florida hit. So over the past several hours and several days, I've seen a kind of a strike here and a strike here, and the GFS has been over here, it's been over Louisiana. So the disagreement is where a final destination would be, but the agreement is that the last several model runs is showing a tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico based on the GFS. The Euro model, again, going out 10 days. This is be next Monday, so a week from Labor Day, showing a low pressure area right there along the Yucatan Peninsula. The Canadian model, again, considerably faster. It has a cross over the Yucatan Peninsula and then a 10-day destination there on the western coast of the Gulf of Mexico in the Bay of Campeche. So I've got 3 models that are indicating something either in the southern or the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, and then 7 days out on the Icon. Again, doesn't go quite as far out as the other 3 models, but this is in a precarious position to possibly make its way into this region. So not super concerned right now because we're talking about a 7 to 10 day forecast period, but starting to get a little bit more concerned when you get agreement where this is pointing in our general direction. Could we see a landfall down in the Bay of Campeche? Certainly we could, and we could possibly see a landfall there along the Florida coast or basically anywhere in between if this indeed does develop. Again, that is kind of the question, is this actually going to develop in the first place? But I've got several models that are saying, yeah, we really think it will. And there are some other factors that I want to show you here as we go to look at the atmospheric conditions as well as the water conditions there too. So this is the ensembles, and you can see that there are basically 3 tropical waves that are out there kind of being followed by this particular model. The wave that's out here right now are all of these lines that are kind of pushing into the Caribbean, perhaps going over toward the Gulf of Mexico. This batch of lines right here is the tropical wave that is currently making its way off of the African coast. These models over here might be another wave that should be coming off the African coast in the next couple of days. At the very least, this is all suggesting that the first couple of weeks of September might actually get busy and might actually start look like tropical September, very different than what we saw during the month of August, where things just really weren't materializing and we didn't get a whole lot of action out there. Wind shear right now is very low in this area over the western part of the Atlantic, and it's also forecast to stay fairly low if it moves out into the Caribbean Sea. So atmospheric conditions might be a bit more conducive for development with this tropical wave as it continues to move off toward the west. Of course, water temperatures are right there where they need to be. Anything over 80-degree water is conducive for development. So on your Celsius scale, you need to look at about 27 degrees. That would be anything shaded in yellow or brighter, going into the reds and the pinks. So you can see that virtually everywhere you go in the tropical Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico would easily be able to sustain any tropical system as long as the atmospheric conditions were conducive as well. Tropical cyclone heat potential doesn't just measure the surface water temperatures, but also measures how deep those 80-degree waters go. And when we're looking at the Caribbean Sea, which is where this low is forecast to kind of move in across that area over the next couple of days and going into next week, the tropical cyclone heat potential here over the central and northern part of the Caribbean Sea is off the charts, and it is here with that loop current that's taking shape there, very similar to what we saw back in 2005 and 2020, where you get that tropical cyclone heat potential going sky high. So if you get a tropical system that works in these particular areas, when they go over it, it's going to start to churn that ocean water, and it's going to churn some of those cooler waters that are below. But when you're in an area right there where you don't have cool water below the surface, you continue to churn up those very, very warm waters. And a tropical system can use that as potential fuel to continue to intensify. And we have seen this case before in the Caribbean and even in the Gulf of Mexico, where you get that rapid intensification. So something that might be kind of a minor tropical storm or a tropical depression could hit one of these areas where you have high tropical cyclone heat potential, and it can quickly work its way up to a category 1, 2, or 3 hurricane in a matter of a day or two. So that is the big concern when we're talking about tropical systems, especially moving over the northern part of the Caribbean, near the Greater Antilles, and into the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So the plan, I've shown you this. I show this on Monday. I also show it on Friday. I know folks are going to play this weekend, and you still have a considerable amount of time, although the weather's not going to be real great this weekend. But if you are going to some of the local grocery stores or Walmarts or Sam's or Costco or different places like that, all of these items, if you don't have them, and these are really just the minimum basics that you would need, the batteries, the flashlights, the water, the non-perishable food, and then the hygiene, and also your house cleaners, all of those things are readily available in the local stores right now. Maybe stock up your first aid kit, check your prescription medicine, see what you've got, maybe talk to your doctors if you can get a little bit of extra medicine that will get you through the next several weeks where you won't have to worry about it. And of course, with all of your important papers, IDs, and insurance, make sure you pack those all together in a water-sealed container, and also take pictures of them and save them as digital. That can make your life a lot easier. Basic tool set, and make sure you get all the supplies for your pets that you need and plenty of entertainment for your kids, because as we go into the peak of the hurricane season, generally about 70 to 80% of all of our named storms happen in the next 6 weeks, and during the month of September, basically the entire Atlantic Ocean is open for business, and you can see there's that orange spot across the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. That is indicating that up to 70 storms have passed through that area between now and going back to 1944. So that's about a tropical system almost every year, give or take a few years here and there, but almost every year we've seen some kind of a tropical system over the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. So nothing major to worry about right now other than the heavy rains that we could see over the course of the weekend, but I would definitely stay with social media. Check out the National Hurricane Center's website. I've got all of those links below in the description. But just kind of be aware of what's going on over the course of the weekend. And if we do get anything to develop over the weekend, I'll do Let's Talk Tropics live again either Saturday or Sunday. But I do plan on having a Let's Talk Tropics as well as Acadiana Weather Today on Labor Day Monday. Not going to take that day off. And of course, we'll have way better information on what this tropical wave is doing as it continues to move a little bit farther toward the west. So stay weather aware, especially as we go into the month of September. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I certainly enjoy visiting with y'all every weekday afternoon. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also turn on those notifications too. That way you know when Let's Talk Tropics drops on Monday, or if we do an extra one over the course of the weekend. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Hope you all have a great weekend. And a real quick answer to that question there, is a Texas landfall possible? Yeah, I would say anywhere in the tropics with that tropical wave is pretty much all bets are off on that. It could be the Caribbean, it could be the Western Caribbean, it could be anywhere along the Gulf Coast, but we cannot pinpoint exactly where it will be. So if that answers your question, yes, a Texas landfall is indeed possible, as pretty much all the Caribbean and the Gulf is open for business this time around. So I'm going to let you go on this Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe, and I hope to see y'all on Monday for Let's Talk Tropics. We'll see you then.